from. We have over 500 people signed up for this webinar today, which is super exciting. And I just want to tell you really quick where everyone's from, because how exciting is this, right? This is the list, Dr. Skinner. Alabama,
Wow.
Arizona, California, Colorado, Delaware, Florida, Georgia, Illinois, Indiana, Kansas, Maine, Maryland, Massachusetts, Minnesota, Montana, Nebraska, New York, North Carolina, Ohio, Oregon, Pennsylvania, Rhode Island, Tennessee, Texas, Utah, Vermont, Virginia, Washington, D.C., Wisconsin,
Wow.
my fellow people in Canada, hello and welcome, France, and Turks and Caicos. How exciting is that?
That's
Love it.
incredible.
Just a great
Absolutely
showing.
incredible. Wow.
Yes.
I'm looking at all the names on the side right now. I'm just like 205.
Yeah.
Ooh,
So
no,
good.
no pressure for us.
Well, for you, I have no
Oh,
pressure.
yeah.
You have all the
Yeah.
pressure.
Hey,
So,
see some DOC folks, Iowa
yeah.
folks.
Yeah, there we go.
Awesome. Love to see that.
Hello,
Big,
everyone. We're
yeah.
really excited to see you. Welcome to Beyond Policy, how shifting culture reduced recidivism statewide. We have an incredible session scheduled for you today, lots to cover, so I want to jump right in. If you're new to us and this is your first time, this is the ACJI crew. Our mission is to drive innovation, elevate voices, and achieve organizational excellence through the strategic use of benchmarks and data, all aimed at shaping a better future for people and communities. We do this by prioritizing staff engagement, psychological safety, and intentionally designing healthy organizational cultures, which is what we're going to be talking about today. If you're interested in learning more about culture and how this work happens, we do have our Culture Academy coming up in April. And so Diana's going to put some information for you in the chat if you want to check that out. We'll also talk about it again at the end of the webinar, so no pressure. But just know there are resources out there as you are inspired by what Dr. Skinner's going to be talking to us about today and you want to learn more. That's a great place to get started. So let me tell you a little bit about our guest today. I am really honored to be joined by Dr. Beth Skinner. She is the executive director of the Iowa Department of Corrections and just an incredible human. So I'm excited for you to get to know her. Beth has spent more than 2 decades in criminal justice. She started her career in community corrections in Iowa, worked with Council of State Governments on reentry and recidivism reduction, and ultimately returned home to help lead Iowa's efforts to improve outcomes for people all across the state. But what stands out to me most about Beth, I hope it's okay that I'm calling you Beth. I just
Oh,
dropped the
no.
whole doctor thing quickly.
No,
Um,
absolutely. Please call me Beth.
but what stands out to me the most is her leadership during some really challenging, incredibly challenging times. So Beth stepped into the director role in 2019. Remember that time, pre-COVID? Oh my
Oh,
gosh.
yeah. And yeah, I'm gonna need
Immediately
lots of
found
therapy.
herself,
Lots of
right?
therapy.
Lots of therapy. She immediately found herself leading through COVID. Then went through a major statewide realignment that brought local community correction districts under her charge, unprecedented, and then some tragic incidents also that deeply affected staff and the department. She has faced a combination of challenges that very few leaders do. And she's here. She was smiling a minute ago, and I often see her smiling. So, what I've seen from Beth is a commitment to doing what's right, to trying to use evidence to guide practice, taking care of people who are doing this work every day. I also find her absolutely hilarious and love that she keeps smiling and makes me laugh a lot all the time. So, we're really lucky to get to learn from her today. And she's going to be sharing her wisdom and her experience as we go along. Please drop your questions in the chat. If we can't get to them all, I'm going to bug her to help me write some things up and get it into a blog so that we can harvest all of that knowledge. So please join me in giving a very warm welcome to Dr. Beth Skinner. Thanks for being here today.
Thanks, Dr. Walker. And you can call me Beth. I'll call you Alex.
Perfect. We're
No,
we're
this is
already aligned.
yeah, we're good. I'm just super excited. Like this is it's kind of pulling all the things together that's been happening over the course of the last, which is like 7 years, which like in dog years, I'd be like in this position for like 60 years. So it feels that way some days, but
I bet.
it's the work and it's the staff that, keep us going and engaged and want to do the right thing and be the best department in the country. So I'm still committed. If I wasn't, I wouldn't be sitting in this chair today. So I got some left in the tank, and just really excited about this conversation. I think it's going to be a very honest and open conversation about some of the tough things we've gone through and how we
Mm,
have moved past that in a very positive way.
I love that. So let's dig right in. I want to just
Good.
really talk to you instead of looking at PowerPoint slides. So most states have been tirelessly working to reduce recidivism with limited movement forever, like for as long as I can remember. And Iowa not only reduced it, but sustained that reduction during a period of major change, like major overhaul change. So I'm really curious and want to unpack how the heck did you do that? And why culture became such a central focus in that work. So, before we dive into the culture piece, can you help us understand what was going on in Iowa and what kind of recidivism reduction we're
Yeah,
really talking about?
sure. Thanks, Alex. Well, I think first and foremost, it has to be said out of the gates, this would not be possible without the help of our staff. This is
Mm,
definitely all our staff and the hard work and commitment they put in every single day for this department. So I would say I would stand on that every single day. They're doing the
mm,
right thing. They're committed to evidence-based practices. I just think that, you know, these results are based on staff's work. So let's put that out there
mhm.
first. So Iowa's 3-year recidivism. So it's a cohort from FY22 to FY25. So it's a 3-year cohort. It's the lowest it's been in the last 10 years. It's at
It's amazing.
32.8%. So FY 2025 marks a 3 percentage point decrease from previous years too. So
Wow.
we are moving the needle year after
We
year
really
after
are.
year. So, but a lot goes into that. I know we're going to talk about that today, but it's staff's commitment. It's having staff have the right tools to do their jobs, the support, a
Mhm.
strong culture. All these things need to happen. I'm probably getting way ahead of myself, but have to happen in order to be successful and to make our community safer. So that's where we're at with recidivism. We're very proud of it. And I'm looking forward to our next data points coming up in July or August.
That's exciting.
I know.
I I know I keep bringing this up, but I just think it's so amazing that you were able to do all of this. I mean, 2023 to 2025, you were going through a huge structural change. Can you give people an idea of what was happening there?
Yes.
Because I think accomplishing this is amazing. Accomplishing this while you're going through a major structural change is mind-blowing.
Yeah, it is. So in 2023, so the legislature, working with the governor's office, came up with they were going Doge, and they were figuring out ways to align state government better to be more seamless, less redundant, all those things. And one of the things that they identified was bringing the CBCs with the DOC. Before, it was more of a pass through, like general funds to them and purchase of service agreement. Now,
Mm.
CBC staff are fully DOC staff. So we're all under
Wow.
one umbrella. We're a unified system, which is fantastic, and great things are happening from that. But, during that time, it was tough. Like when we were going through the legislation, we were doing feedback forums. I want to hear staff's opinion or what they thought. And there were some really hard days. It was a disruption of identity and authority for the districts, a lot of uncertainty, loss of autonomy. The districts were working with their own board of directors, excuse me. The stress, like what's going to happen next.
Mm.
But we knew that this is something we had to really dig into and lean into. So we engaged Guidehouse. People I think are familiar that are DOC people that we engaged Guidehouse to come in initially to help us set up a structure, a set up like how are we going to do this change management stuff. And we developed a roadmap over time to say, okay, what's this going to look like year 1, year 2, year 3? It's not like you're switching on and off a light, right? It's just like really plan, thoughtful work.
Mhm.
And we relied on some principles, right? We wanted people to be at the center, our staff to be at the center. We wanted it collaborative, we wanted it safe, and we wanted inclusive. We want to make sure we improved operations. We want to make data-driven decisions. We focus on change management and communication. But we want to also understand during this time, like that's we did feedback forums and we're really trying to communicate with staff, like what they thought, how this impact was going to change their work day to day,
Mm.
and their readiness for change. So what we did is we engaged staff at all levels during this time. We did, like I said, feedback forums. We had change champions. We did newsletters. We did all kinds of things. We did surveys. And one thing that was extremely important, I'll kind of wrap it up here, is that we didn't avoid difficult conversations. We took them head on. We had those conversations. We sat in those rooms with the directors and their team and their staff and the CBCs and heard what they had to say, whether good, bad, or ugly. And I'm so appreciative that we took that approach. If I do it again, I don't think I would change that.
Yeah, thanks for explaining that. And
Yeah.
we had the pleasure of working alongside Guidehouse, who were instrumental in that kind of structural piece of the change.
Mhm.
And, it seemed like you also realized there was this very people-centered piece of this change, that yes, systems had to
Yes.
change and forms and things, but that you needed to take care of the people. What happened to make you realize that the culture, especially the one among your now very expanded leadership team, needed to be a focal point for you?
So say that again. When did I realize? Say it again, Alex.
Yeah, like what led you to realize that culture and really supporting that now expanded leadership team of yours was an important thing to do?
Yeah, I think, hearing all the feedback I heard from staff,
Mm,
for that period of time really led to me. It's like, how are we going to get past, the fear, the uncertainty, things like that. The identity, people identify, with their, community-based corrections district. Like, how are we going to do that? And I'm like, this is a big thing. Like, if we were going to move forward as a system, we need to have a solid foundation.
mm,
And what that solid foundation looked like is getting everyone on the same page and
yeah,
being consistent, right? And so saying that, these are the things we're going to do, being more collaborative, getting more feedback, creating more feedback loops. All those things were super important to make sure we had a good, solid foundation. Because if alignment happened and we just went boom into going into compliance and all that stuff, that would be the wrong way to go. We have
yeah.
to understand where people are at, meet people where they're at, give them information, make sure we have, like I said, good lines of communication with staff. All those things were super important before we started moving in that direction of consistency and standardization. We want to do the people facing front first. That was the way we thought about it.
That makes a lot of sense. Well, and we had the honor to come alongside you to help work with that expanded leadership team, people who had been in charge of their own areas without much DOC influence for sometimes decades, who are
Mm-hmm.
now DOC employees and directly reporting to you and your team. And so this was a really interesting project, and all your leadership team, they were so engaged and engaged in individual coaching sessions, and then we did some facilitated group work
Yes.
around bringing people together and building that foundation that you're talking about. And I just want to show the group because I think this is so interesting. You were so clear about wanting to use data along the way and
Yes.
show people that we're making progress, not
Mm-hmm.
just talking about things, but really moving the needle. And so I think that this data is so interesting. So what we're looking at here are what we would call pulse data. So asking the leadership staff to report out on how they're feeling on just a few different areas, how engaged they are, if they're seeing equal turn taking and feeling like they can speak up in different spaces and have those tough conversations you're talking about, how psychologically safe they feel, keeping in mind that a lot of these leaders had never had to be in these rooms and collaborate with some of these other folks ever before. And then just that culture uptake piece of like, are we working on culture? Are people embracing it? Is it more than just talk? Are we seeing it in action? And I'm curious, when you look at these data points and what this looks like, what do you notice just in 2025 about the gains that you all were able to make?
I mean, this is really exactly what, from my perspective, and maybe I'm biased, I don't know, but like,
You're
this is
allowed.
progress. This is
Yeah.
major progress. This is exactly what we want to see. It's a good indicator that we're moving in the right direction. Now, if the purple line was down, down farther down the scale, then I'd be like, okay, we need to reassess and say, okay,
Mm,
why is this a lower score than previous times? That kind of stuff. But in all areas, we improved. I remember, Alex, what we used to do, and we still do it with central office staff when we have these big meetings. We do a fist of five, right? One, not great, we'll say 1 not great, 5 being awesome, really good. And we started doing that for different aspects of our culture pillars. One being, I think one of the things we were really big on was communication around culture. And so when we do the fist of 5, I usually see like 1s or 2s come up when we first started doing this. Then it was 2 to 3. And I was like, okay. And then now we're seeing, like in the last few months, 3s and 4s. 4s and
Amazing.
5s. So that is, I think, a really good way is, I know people like get survey burnout, and I totally get that. I hear that, but it helps us know if we're moving the needle and if we have to adjust accordingly. And
Yeah.
when I see this bar chart, I'm like, this is exactly the direction we want to go. And we want to keep building on that over and over. And if we start moving backwards and start, we digress, then we need to we had to reevaluate what's going on and if we're missing something. But yeah, I think it's incredible. Very proud. I'm very proud.
Yeah, me too. And what I love that you're talking about here is just how sometimes we overcomplicate data. It's got to be this official survey, and we spend a year wordsmithing the different questions.
Yeah,
And what you're talking about is just really simple. This data here represents really simple opportunities to just keep your finger on the pulse and be able to say, are we progressing? Are we regressing? What do we need to do here? And I love the fist of 5 idea. What a great way to just not guess where people are at, but start getting some data to help guide you. And when you notice shifts and changes, to be able to think about what's leading to that. And I guess
right.
that brings me to my next question, which is, what do you think changed in the day-to-day experience of your leadership group that led to shifts like this?
I think, communication obviously is incredibly important, right? And that's something we've been working really, really hard on, and communication plans, things like that. But I think it's like really just developing consistency, saying what we're going to do, what we're going to do, we're going to do it. Monitoring that change. And as I mentioned earlier, adjusting accordingly,
Mm.
slowing down, listening, incorporating the feedback you're asking for. Just don't ask feedback to ask for feedback. Ask for
Ah,
feedback and incorporate the feedback. And that's what we did. And I think that had tremendous impacts for us.
that's awesome. And I know there's a lot of, I'm already seeing in the chat, like, can you share information? We want more stuff. So there's a lot of leaders watching today who are working on culture or want to work on
Mhm.
culture. What does progress look like? Like, what are you looking for that tells you I'm starting to see a shift?
I think, and first of all, we can't share this information because it's highly confidential. I'm just kidding.
But we just did.
Yeah, I know.
I'm
I'm
just
just
kidding.
kidding. Okay. So your question is like, what did I notice? Like, what are the things I noticed that there was a shift?
Yeah, with your
Uh,
leadership team, what did you start seeing that you're like, this culture work is working?
yes. People willing to say hard things and willing to give hard feedback, and people willing to have those crucial conversations. And I know we'll probably talk about this, but psychological safety. We're
Mm-hmm.
having conversations at the table now that we haven't had for a very long time. And be able to have, sit down with someone and have a difficult conversation. And those are happening more frequently. To me, that's a sign that people feel safer. Or when I meet with the wardens or the district directors, they're more now they push back and they are giving us their feedback, and we incorporate that feedback. But it's just the communication's better. It's just all these things that we have a long way to go, Alex. I'm not going to lie. We have a long way to go. But these small improvements go a long way, saying we're doing the right things. But it's people feeling like they can be they feel part of the team. They feel part of the decision making. That's happening. I see that. People are more willing to give their feedback or say this is a bad idea before let us go down a road or a rabbit hole we shouldn't. And all that stuff is based on trust, too. And building that trust within this organization that you can say whatever you can say and no one's going to come back. You're not going to be retaliated against, that your feedback is welcome. Everyone's feedback is welcome in every level of our organization. And we're starting to see more of that in feedback forums and things like that.
I love that. I have the pleasure of getting to connect with some of your staff at all levels, and I've noticed it too. Like I think one of the brilliant things you worked on your leadership team because you wanted a solid foundation, and they've been scaffolding that work throughout their different spaces, and you start to see it. And all the change champion work that you did and the feedback loops that you created are all building this momentum around reinforcing the culture that
Right.
you're trying to build in that foundation. It's excellent.
Yeah.
So let's get back to the recidivism piece because this is big. Recidivism is technically, or what I would call a lag measure, right? It's years out, and what we're doing today doesn't necessarily feel always connected to those outcomes, but they are.
Yeah.
Culture, on the other hand, is a lead measure. It's the thing that happens first. When you work on culture, you can impact things like recidivism. And so I'm curious, what does that mean to you, and how has that influenced your experience?
So I have, I think, 3 points I want to make about that.
Okay.
One is recidivism takes years to move, right? We're waiting, we use a 3-year cohort. Every year we have to wait that one day out of the year where we get our recidivism numbers. But recidivism as is an important measure, but it's more than that. It's also measuring, other like intermediate measures such as
Mhm.
employment, housing, treatment outcomes, innovation, pilot programs, reentry measures, giving our staff the tools they need to be successful. And we know that culture changes daily behavior. And by providing a clear blueprint of how this organization makes decisions, we develop the pillars, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. But culture really affects people's decisions and the types of decisions
Mm.
they make. So staff need to know like their work connects to a larger mission of the department. So I think in order to do this, we need we have our pillars and actionable guidelines, good data, collaboration, and a safe and inclusive culture. I can't say that enough. A safe and inclusive culture. And on top of
Mhm.
that is messaging. But really, what I'm trying to say through this is that you have to have a solid foundation to be successful. You can do, if you don't have a trusting, collaborative, inclusive environment, doing all these other things that make recidivism go down will not be as successful if you don't
Mm.
have the buy-in, a strong culture that supports the mission and understands daily decisions, how daily decisions are made, et cetera, if that makes sense.
I think it makes perfect sense. I think you're speaking my language. So
I
yeah, it
know, I
makes a
can
lot of
tell.
sense. I love nerding out about this stuff, but I really appreciate a couple of pieces that you're bringing up here are one, this is never ending work. And you've mentioned that in a few different ways that we still have work to do and, we've been doing it, but we're still doing it. Like it doesn't end. Culture work is not a check the box. Now we can move on to other things. It is the truly, like you describe it, the foundation of everything else. And when you work on culture, I love the way you describe that it influences how people think, act, and engage in their day to day.
Yeah, and how you show
And
up,
yeah, how you show up.
how
And
you
then it
show up.
impacts recidivism and all the other things.
Yep, yep. And
So
I think,
that's great.
oh, can I add
Go
something
ahead,
real quick? Didn't mean to interrupt you.
please.
I think that, we've been corrections, not saying just the DOC here in Iowa, but like, I think we should have been talking about culture 15, 20 years ago. Like, it is so foundational to the work. And like I said, to your point, Alex, it's like you have to have a solid foundation. It's like having pouring a foundation for your house. If
Mhm.
you don't have a good foundation in your house is probably going to start having issues. Same thing with culture. If we don't have a solid foundation, it's going to be tougher to be more successful, more collaborative, and make more informed decisions and trust the data and all these things. So to me,
Mhm.
it's like we're laying our foundation for continued success.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
Thanks for sharing that.
you bet.
We've got a good question in the chat. I don't know if you've seen it, but
I have not. I can't do multiple things at once because I know if I click that, I might end up clicking off this Zoom. So I'm not touching anything.
don't do that. I will
I
take
know.
care of you.
Okay, you just read them to me.
So, yeah. So there's a question about how it looks like technical violations are driving a lot of the recidivism reduction that you're experiencing. And the question is, how do you know that that's culture related or anything that you're actively doing versus changes to legislation or other kind of societal things?
Well, I think, for me, like seeing how recidivism has dropped over the last few years, and yeah, I understand, like, how do you connect the dots, but with this culture work, as our foundation, we've also implemented a lot of evidence-based programming. Our risk
Mm,
assessments, our case management tool, all those things that we've been doing over the last 10 years we've done a really good job implementing, and we built CQI into that as well. But I feel like the number has been very, consistently high for a long time. But now, since we've been really implementing all these evidence-based practices mixed with the ACJI Implementation Academy, mixed with other professional development opportunities, but we have such a good, solid foundation that we could set these things on top of it and execute them with fidelity.
mm,
And for me, you know, for good recidivism reduction, I think you have to look at, um, your culture. You have to look at psychological safety. You got to look at honest feedback, which leads into evidence-based programming, good decisions around that, and decisions making the department, which then feeds into recidivism, if that makes sense.
yeah, it does. And it's making me want to share a story with you and see if it resonates
Let's
a
do it.
little bit. But in another state, there was some attempts to legislate reductions in technical violations.
Mhm.
And so essentially, they shortened the list of things that could result in someone going back to prison. So it went from, I'm making this up, but like 15 things that would make you eligible to six,
Right.
right? So they just shortened it up. And what happened as a result was the parole officers, unfortunately, created a bunch of workarounds. So one of the things that wasn't taken off the list was if you tampered with your electronic monitoring device, that would still make you eligible to go back to prison. And so we went from having very few people on electronic monitoring to most of our supervisees being on electronic monitoring, and then lots of people were still going back to prison. So I share this story because what I'm hearing in response to this question is like, even with legislative changes and all the things that have gone on, and it might be very hard to tease out exactly like causality here,
Yeah. Yeah.
that people find workarounds when the culture doesn't support the changes that are being made, when we're not doing things to fidelity,
Yep.
as you're saying, we're going to find workarounds to get what we want anyway. And that's what I believe happened in this example I'm sharing with you. But I'm just curious what your thoughts are.
Yeah, I mean, I want to say I do agree with you, Alex. It's tough to make that correlation, but I do think that when you have a good, safe, inclusive environment where there's good communication and there's resiliency and people are psychologically safe, when we have these types of situations, we'll just talk about technical violations, that staff feel comfortable that they can go to their supervisor and say, hey, I have an issue with this, or agree to disagree, whatever that looks like. But it's creating that
Hmm.
safe environment where those conversations can happen where, if that wasn't in place, maybe people just do the workarounds, right? Instead of
Hmm.
like having a good culture means that we have that direct line of feedback between maybe a supervisor and a parole officer or probation officer that are having those difficult conversations, what to do, and they might not agree. But challenging the process and keep it opening up a pathway for those conversations. And I think that's what this culture work is doing for us versus just trying to work around. Does that make
Hmm.
sense?
I think it does. It
Yeah.
speaks to me in terms of, having a direct line even to understanding the why and really
Yes.
helping to
Yep.
work with people to
Sure.
realign their
Yep.
identity and their practice with this
Yep.
new way of doing work instead of
Absolutely.
what usually happens, which is you tell me to do something that I disagree with. So I go find friends and talk about you poorly
Water cooler
and don't
talk.
do it.
Yeah. And that's why it's
Yeah.
like if you open up those that psychological safety for someone that wants to revoke someone and they have to go to their supervisor, you want them to be comfortable going to the supervisor and having a very productive, maybe uncomfortable situation if you disagree, and that people aren't going to feel like they're going to be retaliated against because they were pushing against their supervisor. No, our culture is supporting those kind of conversations. So you don't have
That's
to do work
awesome.
around. You can go to your supervisor and have that kind of conversation.
That's great.
Yeah, that's important.
Yeah, I agree. So thank you for that question. Please keep the questions coming. I'd also love to hear from folks in the chat. If you had to use one word to describe your organization's culture right now, what would it be? I'm just curious where everyone's at, and what your culture is like right now. And in the meantime, Beth, I was hoping that you could talk to us about kind of what I know we talked a little earlier, but what really led you to say we got to focus on culture? You could have focused on so many different things. And so, what told you that we can technical fix all day long, but we're not going to get where we need to go? We got to go deeper.
Yes. Great question too, Alex. So the way I see it, what I was seeing, I think other people were seeing as well. I think a lot of the DOC staff that are on will probably agree with this, is that we are operating in silos. And
Mm,
that means not just institutions are in silos and CBCs are in silos. Everyone was in silos. Like the
mm,
prisons were in silos amongst all the prisons. CBCs were in silos. And central office was in their own silo, like tons of silos. Lack of feedback. Um, that people weren't comfortable to say what they were thinking. Um, I noticed that, there was resistance, and that's probably because we didn't explain the why or how it fit into the larger mission.
mm,
Inconsistent practice, all over the board, whether it be in prison or CBC. How do we get people on the same page? And if it's an autonomy thing based on the district or the prison, then explain to us why that's different, right? And so having those
mhm.
conversations, which are good, say, it's a little different here because of A, B, and C. So, working with inconsistent practice and what's, local control versus a more statewide initiative. As you mentioned too, the water cooler talk, like there is a lot of that happening. And so instead of going to the water cooler, go to that person, because
Yeah.
that's just what it does. It divides people quickly. Um, and we did not have consistent communication. Like we just, over the course, of me being director, like I feel like the communication could have been so much better. And I think that had to be addressed. Better communication, people in the know, people being in the room, helping making decisions, all those things. That stuff wasn't really happening very often, very little. And so that stuff had to be changed. The stuff had to be changed if we wanted people to feel part of the bigger mission and part of that decision-making process.
That's I mean, I think you're speaking to a lot of people as I'm looking through the chat. We've got everything from chaos to amazing, the best it's ever been. But I think everyone in the in between is listening, like they can probably hear themselves in how what you're describing, whether in totality or in pieces and parts. And it's really insightful that you were like, we have to do something about this. And we were honored you partnered with us at ACJI during this period to do that culture work. What did it
Yeah.
look like? And what were you hoping would come out of the work that we were doing together?
Well, I knew like once we started getting the roadmap, we started, mapping out what this is going to look like around change management. We knew that ACGI had the tools that we needed to and believed in
Mhm.
the principles of the Leadership Academy. So you guys came in and helped with individual coaching. Like I had a coach, like directors had a coach, people had coach all over the organization, institutions and prisons. We had small, large group meetings. We just discussed ongoing themes or issues that we're seeing in the department. Twice a year, we get together, learn about skill development. We got our change champions, which are huge, that can spread the
Yeah.
word. We want to invest in staff at all levels. But part of that, what you guys helped us with is that you helped us like understand the beliefs and habits of our organization, right?
Mm.
Like getting people, hearing people and what they thought. Part of that process, we named we came up with our pillars and we created feedback loops. And one thing I probably like the most about it is that, and you'll appreciate this, Alex, is that so ACGI, so we're doing the implementation academy. Well, we're training all of our supervisors in it right now, right? Hundreds of staff are going through it. Then we're going to create a TOT model for staff, all staff to be trained in the implementation academy because we believe those principles are absolutely spot on. So doing that, I believe is going to have sharing a common language that
Mm.
these are our principles. This is how we manage our culture. This is how we manage change. And all the things that you guys teach in that academy, like, for example, fail forward. You don't hear the word failure in corrections very often because if you say it's a really naughty word, right? Like if
Mm-hmm.
you fail, that means something bad happens. Well, not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily, right? Murphy's Law, that is real. That is so real. Yeah.
It's
Just when you
been
think
your
you're
life
walking
for
out
a
the
few
door for the
years.
weekend, something blows up. You're like, oh gosh. Progress, not perfection. What I'm
Mm,
hearing now, after the work with you guys, and we still have more work to do in terms of really pushing out, these principles to all staff. So everyone understands these principles that we live by, right? And so knowing that, when people say, talk about failure, it's not bad. Fail
mm.
forward, you learn, you grow, and we're a learning organization. So, interfacing with you guys has been exceptionally, like, it's been amazing because it's giving people grace and knowing that we're human and that nothing's ever going to be perfect. And we're dealing in a human business and that everything we do is sometimes not going to be perfect. Or
Yeah.
we're going to have to, adapt and pivot in a direction and be flexible and things like that. So I think that has been great to be able to share that staff really share a common language now. And I think it'll be more so as we get through the training and stuff like that. But I think it's been very helpful. It's been a great partnership, and not just saying because
Well,
you're on here, but it really was a
thank you.
yeah. Once we had the foundation for the roadmap in terms of change management, what we're going to look at first, but culture was like, let's get everyone on the same page, understand what we're about,
Yeah.
and I want people in this department to know what we're about, and we're not about perfection. We're about progress. We're about learning from our mistakes. We give grace. We believe in second chances. I mean, all those things. And so, in corrections historically, prior to like me being in the seat here in 2019, but when I was first in the early 2000s, no one ever talked about mistakes. No one ever talked about failures. No one ever talked about, progress over perfection, things like that, because it's a scary thing to talk about in corrections. And now we
Mhm.
see, our staff embracing it. And to me, that has been the most, when I hear someone say like just one of the principles, I'm like, yes, all right. Like people are getting it. It's
Yeah.
really starting to really be really like um, just tied to the work and tied to threaded throughout our agency in all different sorts of ways.
I love that. And one of my favorite aha moments in this process was as we were going through the facilitation of the small and large groups using themes. So coaching is confidential, but we would bring kind of themes about what might be going on. I
Yep.
noticed a shift over time as people started to build connections and that inclusivity was happening and your team was kind of meshing and molding, that
Mm-hmm.
they needed less and less of us. That
Mm-hmm.
I would hear people say, I think we're looking at this only from a technical lens. What's the adaptive piece here?
Yes.
And you would start seeing like, how do we fail forward in this moment? What does that look like? And that's really exciting stuff. So you're talking about
Oh,
language and lens and you could see it happening in real time with your team,
oh
which is
yeah.
exciting.
Yeah, it is. It is. And I think one thing I would say about that too is that you have to be patient with with the process and progress. It's not going to come
Mm,
overnight. This is a absolute long game.
yeah, totally agree. Um, I want to just point out one thing that you said though, because I've had a similar experience that when I think back to the beginning of my career, these kinds of things were very taboo to
Yeah.
talk about, and you just did what you were told and whatever.
Don't question it.
Don't question it.
Yep.
So you've been really trying to drive this idea of creating a learning organization in Iowa for many years now.
Mhm.
But I just want to own that, or maybe ask, was it scary in the beginning when you were all by yourself? Like when you were like starting this? Maybe you weren't all by
Oh,
yourself. You have some amazing folks on your team, but like it must have felt a little scary.
I was shit my pants.
Oh, there you go.
I was like, I didn't want, especially coming out of the gates with this, we really didn't want, we knew that we're going to make mistakes. We knew that we're going to fail forward. We know we're a learning organization, but yeah, it's scary. It's because, Iowa's not a huge state, but it's large enough that, when you make these kind of, change management, you know, you have to invest everything in it. You can't just like, it's not a one-off. Like I said, it's not a light
Yeah.
switch. It's a complete investment in getting everyone to see the possibilities, the impacts it can have on this organization but it was super scary because it seemed so big. Like, I'm like,
Mhm.
how are we going to do this? And I was scared. I was really scared. I was like, this could be, if we don't implement this correctly or whatever, it could go sideways real fast. And so it didn't. I mean, it's been growing, it's been positive, but I was scared. I'm not going to lie. I was like, but I was hopeful. So that, I mean, that was the important piece of that. But yeah, it's a scary undertaking because something, you really have to be okay being vulnerable and
Mm.
hearing hard things about the agency or certain behaviors or decisions. You have to be ready for that. And that was really hard to hear a lot of things that I heard during this process, but you got to show up. And
Yeah.
it was hard. And we got through that, but you have to be ready and prepared to hear, what your issues are in your department and are you ready to fix them? And how are you going to fix them and who do you need? So
Yeah.
sorry, that was a long answer to like a yes, no question, but
I think it's been my favorite part so far. Like, I appreciate you being willing to share your real feelings about what that was like, because I can only imagine how scary and maybe alone you felt in the beginning as you were kind of doing this big thing that you didn't know. You were hopeful, but didn't know if it would
yeah,
have an impact, could have eaten you alive. So, good
yes,
job.
absolutely. Thank
Kudos.
you.
So more recently, we've been working on psychological safety. You've talked about it a few times. Why was that an important addition to this work, and what does it look like?
I think we want through psychological safety, we wanted to really create an environment of trust and courage in our department.
Mm,
A lot of people, some people don't know what psychological safety is, and we've done work with you guys. We brought you guys in because ACJI understands psychological safety, so we brought you guys to the table and starting that conversation now with the highest level leadership in the department, and we're going to push that down over time so people really understand what psychological safety means to them. But for me, it's critical, honest feedback. It's shared accountability. It's not pointing fingers. It's being willing to look at someone and have difficult conversation. It's also being open to feedback and hearing hard things. Um, but it's like, yeah, being safe and being able to say things that probably was taboo 20 years ago that you can say to
hmm
your supervisor or someone can say to the director, hey, I disagree with this approach. And I do these feedback forums and people do not hold back. I mean, and that's fantastic. So that's a good sign. But yeah, it's
Yeah.
people feeling safe. And the word psychological safety is something that is just hasn't been, it just never existed when I started. And now,
hmm
we have culture, right? We're talking about all this culture stuff we're doing, right? And then we build in some support there through psychological safety so people can feel like they can make the change and provide that honest feedback and have that courage and create that space for people when we are doing all this culture work. So we have to have
hmm
those two. I think the two go together.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I
Have
would agree
like
with
one
you.
without the other,
It's
in my
really hard.
opinion.
Yeah. I think you're absolutely right. And I also appreciate, I think when we were new in this field, I think you and I have both been around the same time, somewhere between 25 and 30 years, although no
Yeah.
one's allowed to do the math about how old that makes you,
I just turned
not me.
35 today.
Yeah. Happy birthday. Um, I think you felt it. You felt what being psychologically unsafe felt
Yeah,
like, but we didn't really have words for it or what that really meant, or you could
absolutely.
feel psychologically safe environments. And I'm seeing that even in the chat, like it's not easy. Psychological safety is rewarded vulnerability. It's
Yeah,
that it's
it
okay to
truly
be
is.
vulnerable. And that's so hard um, to do that. And so even just you sharing what it was like in the beginning of this
Oh,
process is just such a testament to, what psychological safety can do
yeah.
so that we can all learn and grow together.
Yeah. I mean, I'm being really open and honest. Like, I can't tell you how many times I cried during that time.
I bet.
Yeah, it was a lot.
Yeah.
It felt very raw at times.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you start, then the imposter syndrome pops up. That's a whole nother webinar to talk about,
Let's
right?
do that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's imposter syndrome, right? It's that you feel like you're not qualified for the job. It's a lot of mixed emotions, but the resiliency of doing the work, it just has profound impacts on the department. You got to get through it. You got to work through
Yeah.
it. It's not overnight thing. It's a daily thing. Every day you
Yeah.
got to work on.
Yeah. So we got another question in the chat, which is, what do you do with, this must be from people who know our stuff. So the word is, what do you do with the no nationers? But for those of you who don't know what that is, the people who seem to be rowing in the opposite direction, who no matter what you do, seem to just be, engaging in water cooler talk, perhaps even actively destructive to whatever you're trying to do, but they're just like holding you down.
Yeah.
How did you do that? How did you manage
Yeah.
that space?
I, I don't think you brush those people aside. I think you got to lean into them and
Mm,
you got to have those tough conversations. And, I think what happens sometimes is people just don't understand why we do all these things, right? We have a very complex organization. People don't understand the why behind things. And I think that was what thing that we really focused on too is the why. Why are we doing this? Why are we implementing this new policy? Why are we doing this program? We take it back. It should always either point to our pillars, which is professional development, trust, innovation, flexibility, or courage, or to the mission of this department. So
mm,
those people that are resistive, those are the ones I want to lean into and say, do you understand the why? And so to kind of be more proactive when we start rolling out things, and we know there'll be resistors, is that we are very clear how this connects to their work and makes our community safer. And there'll be some people that will never come along. They'll never come along. And that just it happens. But I'm going to damn well give my best shot to make sure that we work with them. We try to have them understand what the why is, create more some psychological safety so they can tell us what's wrong or what's what they disagree with. But you're going to have that in any organization. Don't run from
mhm,
these people. Lean into them. I would.
mhm. I love that.
Mm-hmm.
And the terms that we use at ACJI is kind of at some point after you've tried to coach people in, if
Mm-hmm.
you can't do that, then it becomes a coaching people out. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, yeah. Well, usually what happens is I know Simon Sinek does some great work around early adopters, majority, all that stuff. My hope is that, the majority of this department is going to be in the normal curve and there's going to be just some outliers, right?
Hmm.
And I think that, it's going to happen, but like I said, you just have to do your best to educate, communicate, listen to feedback, all those things. And you're right. I mean, some people will end up being on island on their own when the majority of staff will be on board and they're going to be out there by themselves. They're going to have to make a decision if they come along or if they want to stay there, or if they want to leave. And
Yeah,
that's tough. It's tough.
it is tough. I'd imagine, though, and what I've seen in your agency and others is that as the culture becomes more of a focus and more embedded and a part of who we are, fit becomes clearer. It's
Mhm.
not as squishy because we're really clear about what kind of culture we're trying to create. We're doing it intentionally every
Yep.
single day. We're talking about it intentionally. And so you can start to see very quickly who's a good fit and who isn't. And so you
Yes,
can have
absolutely.
some of those conversations.
Absolutely. Well said, Alex.
Oh, thank you. Look at this. We should do this more often.
I know. I just feel so happy to do this on a Friday. I love
Oh,
it.
I love it.
Good way to start the weekend.
So, one of the other things you did, because you didn't have enough work to do while you were going through all of this, was implement a dashboard. And people actually have commented about it in the chat already that they've been looking at your public dashboard. Many organizations do this, and it just ends up being kind of like the file that you file away and never look at again. This was important to you, though. I'm curious, can you tell us why and what made it different than kind of traditionally how we use
Yeah.
data?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is really an important piece, I think. So the difference really lies in grounding the data tool, whatever we might be using at that time, within a comprehensive cultural change management strategy. The two have to connect, ensuring that the metrics drive their actionable behaviors. The culture is not just about reporting, right? And we have a shared ownership around the data, but it's not just data for data. Data is connected to the culture, to the work, and it's not to catch you a gotcha. It's for change management. It's for improving outcomes. It's to make sure that the metrics, we have metrics that we can have actionable behavior behind. That's what's different. It's not just to say, hey, let's look at this and then do nothing with it or just report on. Like, we want the data to tell us a story. And based on
Mm.
that story, we might need to act. And based on acting, like again, a strong culture, a culture that gets why data is so important, then we come up with plans to, if it's an issue we have to fix or whatever that is, we are able to do that.
That's awesome. So you're really using it to drive decisions and what's
Yes.
happening in the day to day, and you're looking at
Yes.
it as a measure of the day to day culture and
Yeah. The
practice.
change management, absolutely.
That's
Hmm.
awesome.
Yeah. And I think, we want to be able to take data and do something with it and not just look at it, right? We want to be actionable about
Yeah.
it. And I think that's what's great about the team, our staff here in the department, is that they really understand data and data tells a story. And so based on that, otherwise we're just guessing, right? And so we rely heavily on data because we like to make decisions based off that.
I love it. So I think a lot of people are listening today because they're leading change, they're going through it, they're in it, and they want to know, they want you to teach them all the things. So what's one thing that you want them to take away about culture as they're going through a change?
Do I have to say one thing?
No, you're allowed to
Okay.
do whatever you want.
I'm gonna do it anyway, right?
Yes.
Culture is never done. It is every day. There's no finish line for culture. You continue to work on culture as long as you're sitting in the seat. Whatever culture just doesn't. There's always ways to improve. There's always ways to, you know, um, you know, get better outcomes. It's just never done. And culture, more importantly, is it requires reinforcement,
Hmm.
right? Everyday reinforcement. This is not a flavor of the day. It's none of that stuff. And also, leadership modeling, that we're leaders and staff are modeling the way for others to see around culture and coaching and psychological safety. So it's being in those, being in position, no matter what position you're in this department, you're modeling the way, right? You're modeling the way, you're reinforcing the behavior, all those things. But it's a long game. It's an absolute long game, and you have to be committed to it every single day.
So eat your Wheaties.
Eat your Wheaties, but the thing is that every day you need to show up. And
Yeah.
every day you need to ask yourself, if I'm aligned in this practice and decisions around things that can impact culture, I need to make sure that um, that I'm asking myself every day through a lens, like, is this going to take us closer to our culture or further away? What am I missing? Is this something that has to be more inclusive and more decision, more people at the table to make those decisions? But you have to like ask yourself when you're making major decisions, how are we going to communicate to the staff? We got to connect it to, the why, our mission, all those things. But you have to ask yourself, you have to use that cultural lens every day when you're making decisions.
That makes sense. Well, I know we're running out of time, but I would be remiss if I didn't get to ask you personally, what would you say that you learned as a leader through the last however many years of challenges?
Um, I would say slow and steady wins the race. Um,
Mm,
I tend to move at a very fast pace, which I have to slow myself down. Use your partners, use people with expertise. We use ACJI, we use Recidivism, we use Guidehouse. Don't feel like you have to do it on your own.
mm,
Sometimes you have the resources, sometimes you don't. But if you have the resources, engage other people, especially from an outside perspective looking in. That's also helpful because sometimes we get in our own way. We think we
yeah.
see something as it is, and it's really not. Um, I also think don't get discouraged. The first couple of years are tough, right? Because you're really trying to lay the foundation down. You're going to hear hard things. You're going to have a lot of water cooler talk, but you stay the course, right? You keep focusing on that culture, and then you get results. We did in that bar chart, right? But don't get discouraged. It takes years to do this. Stay consistent. Keep lines of communication open. Be willing to listen to hard things. Build a solid foundation of your values, your pillars, and everything connects, and make sure everything connects back to those values and those pillars when you make decisions.
I
That would be
love
my
that.
best advice.
That's really great advice. Thank you for that. So, folks, we are down to a few minutes. If you have any last minute questions, put them in the chat. If we don't get to them, we will at some point write about them because I'm not done bugging Dr. Skinner here. If you want to learn more about how to do this work, how to create plans that can be tied to metrics that you can use to drive change, join us for our strategic planning and intensive that starts in April. If you want to know more about culture and psychological safety and how to do the work that Dr. Skinner's been talking about, check out our Culture Academy. We've got one starting in April as well. There's a QR code here and there's links and all the things. And so don't forget that we also have more Learn at Work Live stuff coming up next. And we're going to do some stuff about motivational interviewing in May, but we have a whole lineup for the whole year to talk about stuff. You can also get a bunch of free tools. So Dr. Skinner talked about how if you don't have the resources, it doesn't mean you can't be learning and growing. We've got a ton of free resources on our website and tools, and you can talk to people about what they're doing. You do not have to do this work alone. There's plenty of stuff out there. So please don't hesitate to reach out and talk to us. I think we have about 2 minutes left, Beth. So let me see if I can't get to some other
Okay.
questions here. Um, Let me check out the piece here. So again, there's a lot of questions about the resistance piece, and just it sounds like people are feeling like they're not getting a lot of movement. Do you have any other, you talked about leaning in. Let's say you've got like a really challenging silo or a really challenging individual who is a culture influencer but is going in the wrong direction. How would you go about doing something about that?
And we're talking about like people that are just not coming along, like
Just not
basically,
coming
yeah.
along.
I think, resistant is, I think it's natural to the culture. Like, change is tough. Change is really tough for a lot of people. Change is really tough in corrections. We have a very, we have these things, these policies, these practices, and these things that can be pretty strict and narrow. And so I think, creating that again, that creating that culture of open feedback and open
Mm,
dialogue, and reaching those people, or reaching them, maybe it's in a division or one agency or something like that that's just not coming along. I would, I personally would go in and find out. I would meet with leadership. I would meet with staff. I'd find out what's going on. What are they not agreeing with, and showing them, like, do we all agree that we want to make our communities safe? Yes. Do we all agree
mhm.
that we have to work as a team? Yes. Okay. So establishing some just basic things like we all could agree to, and then building off that and saying,
Love
here's
that.
how your work connects to, public safety, to creating safer environments for your staff or for, those in your community, and really working on that why piece of their jobs and how that can, connect that to the larger organization, and how having a strong culture of psychological safety, change management will help them, give them tools to guide them along in the process. And some people are going to take you up on, Alex, and some are not. But
Yeah.
you, as a leader in this organization, I'd be doing a disservice if I didn't tackle those more difficult, people that just don't want to come along, because
Yeah.
they need to see the whole, like, kind of like what this looks like, bigger picture, how it impacts them. So I think that communication piece is extremely important when you do have resistors, is to make sure they understand what we're trying to accomplish, if that makes any
I
sense.
love that. It makes perfect sense. And I really appreciate that you're pointing out that we have common foundation, that when you dig deep enough and you spend time to get
Yes,
curious, we're often more aligned than we think. Then
yes,
we just need to build together and what that can
yes.
look like.
That's why you start at
So,
like ground. First question: do you believe in public safety? Yes. You find
mm,
all the common ground, and then you build up from there.
I love that.
Yeah.
Will you come back and talk to us one day about imposter syndrome?
Yes, yes, I would love
Yay.
to. That
Okay.
is that's a real thing. Like, that
Oh,
is,
100%.
yeah, it's a real thing.
Okay, well, I'm going to hold you to it. Well, thank you everyone for joining us.
Thanks,
Today was
everyone.
amazing. Dr. Skinner, thank you so much.
Thanks, Alex.
We love seeing everyone here. Thanks for all your questions, and we'll put some extra information into a blog sometime soon so that you can see all of the other advice that Dr. Skinner has to give. So thanks,
Awesome.
everyone. Have a
Thanks,
good rest of
Alex.
your day.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care,
Thanks for
everyone.
joining.